Since it's Sunday morning, it's time for a little church because the Christian nationalism movement has gone from fringe to front page as conservative candidates and lawmakers have amplified the rhetoric that their Christian beliefs should serve as the bedrock of American identity and that the government should reflect that. In a recent article for The Dispatch, David French writes, quote, "The world's most Christian advanced nation is tearing itself apart, and its millions of believers bear much of the blame. Freedom of religion is literally coded into our Constitution. And to be clear, there's nothing wrong with being proud and practicing Christians, but the right is taking two extremes."
We need to be the party of nationalism, and I'm a Christian, and I say it proudly. We should be Christian nationalists.
Buckle up, put on the full armor of God, take a stand against the left schemes. I'm on a mission to keep Florida free.
The church is supposed to direct the government. The government is not supposed to direct the church. That is not how our founding fathers intended it. And I'm tired of this separation of church and state junk that's not in the Constitution. It was in a stinking letter, and it means nothing like what they say it does.
And it's not even Halloween. Joining me now is David French, senior editor of The Dispatch, contributing writer at The Atlantic, and co-host of Advisory Opinions and Good Faith podcast. David, this is you and me, baby. You need to help me understand, help all of us understand how we got here, how we suddenly find ourselves now so many Americans embracing this Christian nationalism. I mean, people were concerned about the moral majority back in the 1980s. Today, they're like, oh, yeah, you know, Christian nationalism, the government needs to be controlled by religion. What's your take on where we are?
Yeah, well, we're seeing the fruit of about 20, 25 years of a particular kind of activism that was saying America's on the verge of falling. We're in the face of a dramatic emergency. Christians need to engage, and what Christian engagement means is engagement on certain kinds of issues. It wasn't a holistic look at what Christian engagement means. You know, for example, scripturally, Micah 6:8 is a famous verse that says that God asks us to act justly, to love kindness, and to walk humbly. And yet everything is pouring into urgency, public policy, urgency, public policy. And over time, Christians began to adopt an ends justifies the means approach to politics. So that whatever was necessary to get specific policies enacted, well, that's what we're going to do. And so that completely contradicts as an upside down from a scriptural context that if you look at the early church, was not focused on overturning the Roman Empire, was not focused on overturning a political order, but leading radically with a countercultural approach to faith in the face of fear, hope in the face of fear, love in the face of fear. And that sadly doesn't really characterize the overwhelming majority of Christian political engagement right now.
So, keying off of your quote of Micah 6:8, you write in the Dispatch, Christian politicians who act as if entire sections of clear biblical moral commands simply don't exist, so long as they take the, quote, just, in right-wing eyes, position on issues of social and cultural consequences. That speaks to me about that intersectionality between religion, faith, politics, and culture. That's a dangerous mix as we see the Lauren Boeberts and Marjorie Taylor Greenes and DeSantis's throwing on the cloak of God and now running for office or in office, sort of projecting this kind of Christian nationalism, which isn't about what Micah 6:8 is all about.
Well, you know, this is what I'm saying. I'm not saying that Christians should pull away from politics. One of the most powerful social movements in modern American history was thoroughly Christian, and that was the civil rights movement. But the civil rights movement, in that same piece, I quote John Lewis, is saying, you know, look, they were leading with reconciliation and grace at the same time that they were courageously confronting injustice. And so look at the contrast between the civil rights movement and how it behaved in the face of fire hoses and brutal and dogs and brutal beatings with January 6th, which was infused with Christian activism, but it couldn't be more opposite from the civil rights movement. And my point is, Christians, like the Christians in the civil rights movement, always have to be thinking about the how of how they're interacting in politically, not just the what, not just the policy, but how they do it. And now what's happened, especially in far right circles, is the how doesn't matter. It's just the what. It's just winning. It's just win, 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 defeat the other side. And so, again, it's the ends justify the means. And it's the total contradiction of, say, the spirit of the civil rights movement, which I think was one of the finest examples of Christian political engagement that we've seen in the whole history in the United States.
Yeah, you know, so help us understand then, if that's the case, how did we move from reconciliation and grace to condemnation of lifestyles, condemnation of other people, condemnations of people who don't, live or believe what we believe. Where do they think they go with this? I mean, what does it look like on the other side of if the Boeberts are right and get their way at the end?
Well, it's a very top-down vision. So the fear is what's used to motivate millions of people to come to the polls. And then if those millions of people come to the polls, you can elect godly leaders, and godly leaders will help redeem or save the nation. But, look, if you go back to the Trump administration on January 6th, Trump had evangelical Christian one of his lead attorneys, evangelical Christian, his chief of staff, evangelical Christian, senators who were leading some of the farcical election objections, evangelical Christians. So you had evangelical Christians really at the pinnacle of American power. But were they acting for justice? No. Were they acting for the good of the nation? No. They were acting for the power of one man, Donald Trump. And so this idea that if you just get enough Christians in power, that everything's going to be okay, is, again, it's fundamentally false. What you're seeking is justice, but you're seeking justice in a particular way, with kindness and with humility. And that kind of culture can tolerate a lot of disagreement, because you're walking into public policy debate saying, hey, this is what I believe, but I could be wrong. And under no circumstances am I going to mistreat you when I'm engaging with you in politics.
David French, I love my discussions with you, my friend. Thank you for taking a moment to walk us through your very insightful piece in the Dispatch. It's entitled Christian Political Ethics Are Upside Down. Thank you very much. Appreciate you.
Thanks so much.
Up next, Ali Velshi joins me to talk a little bit about the war in Ukraine, now at the 6-month mark. Plus, fears are growing over a possible radiation leak at Europe's largest nuclear plant as Russia's invasion into Ukraine stretches into day 186. It's an update you don't want to miss right after this.